Good evening. Welcome to EPA's public meeting regarding 5 draft NPDES permits for bulk oil storage facilities located along the Chelsea River. We will get started in a couple minutes. We just want to give people time to join. In the meantime, if you need interpretation services, please refer to the instructions on the screen. In order to hear interpretation, you need to enter the audio channel that is appropriate for your language. Thank you. Good evening. We'll get started at 7:03. I just want to give people a couple minutes to join. In the meantime, please review this slide. If you need interpretation during the meeting, please select the appropriate audio channel for your language. Good evening. Welcome to the United States Environmental Protection Agency's public meeting regarding 5 draft Clean Water Act National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits for bulk storage facilities located along Chelsea River, also known as Chelsea Creek. These facilities are located in Chelsea, Revere, and East Boston, Massachusetts. My name is Jeff Norcross. I am the Section Chief of EPA New England's Office of Public Affairs, and I will be moderating tonight's meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight. During tonight's meeting, EPA will share a presentation regarding the draft permits and an environmental justice analysis related to the permits. After the presentation, we will respond to clarifying questions from meeting participants. EPA is joined by state partners from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. Our state partners will discuss the state's permitting process during tonight's presentation. Note that the presentation is available to download in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. There's a link in the chat that brings you to a website where you can download the presentations if you prefer to follow along in that manner. You also, as was shown in the prior slide, if you need interpretation in Spanish, Portuguese, or Haitian Creole, please select the appropriate audio channel using the globe icon at the bottom of the screen as shown right now. Thank you, Eric. As we navigate our way through this unique time, the health and safety of our staff, contractors, and the communities we serve is a top priority. As a result, EPA has canceled or postponed in-person meetings and events to reflect current COVID-19 guidance from federal, state, and local officials. With that said, EPA is committed to maintaining contact with affected communities using other communication channels, including virtual meetings like this meeting tonight. The virtual platform we are using tonight is new to EPA, so we apologize for any technical difficulties during the meeting and ask for your patience as we embark on this together. Please advance to slide 2. Or the next slide, Eric. At this time, I would like to introduce Damian Houlihan. Damian is EPA New England's acting Water Permits Branch Chief. Damian will introduce tonight's presenters and will lead us through tonight's presentation. Thank you, Damian.
Thank you, Jeff, and welcome everyone to tonight's presentation on the NPDES permitting effort for the 5 Chelsea Creek terminals. I'm going to be presenting some slides this evening, followed by Shauna Little, who's the permit writer for this project. Marcus Holmes, our Environmental Justice Coordinator in the Office of Regional Administrators, will speak on the environmental justice analysis, as will Evan Lewis, who is an additional permit writer in the Water Permits branch. Next slide, please. We're going to present an overview of the description of the federal NPDES permitting process. This is a federal permit as opposed to a state issued permit. We're going to give a brief overview of the facilities that are affected, a description of the draft permit requirements and conditions. And as I said, Marcus will present an overview of the environmental justice activities, and then we'll explain opportunities for public participation. As Jeff mentioned, throughout this presentation, we'll be presenting a reminder slide. If you need interpretation services, please click on the globe icon and select your language, English, Portuguese, Spanish, or Haitian Creole. You must select the language.
Next slide. And as a reminder to everyone, if you are looking for interpretation, you need to have Zoom client downloaded to be able to see it. Again, Zoom client, that's the one that's downloaded to your desktop. If you need any help downloading it, please feel free to reach out to myself, Charlotte Gray. You can reach out to Katrina Reitman or Rosa Beato in the chat, and we can help walk you through it. Next slide, please. And we just want to go over a couple functions with Zoom in case you haven't used it. The mute and unmute button is in your left-hand corner. When you have a line through it, you are muted. When there is no line, you are unmuted. We ask that everyone please stay muted unless you are called upon to ask a question. Next slide. Next is the raise hand function. That's going to be on the right-hand side, and it's going to be in the reaction section. If you click on that, a pop-up will come up showing a raise hand. Please click on that when you would like to ask a question, and we will have a question and answer session at the end. Next slide. Next, we have closed captioning. So if you hit on the closed captioning button at the bottom, you'll be able to see subtitles. Next slide. And finally, for those of you that are calling in tonight, you have the same functions. While you are not able to listen to interpretation, you will be hearing the presentation in English. The slides are on the website in Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. And to unmute yourself with the phone, please press *6. And to raise your hand, please press *9. Next slide, please. And finally, we have a couple ground rules for the meeting. As you guys are all aware, this is a public meeting, and we ask that you please keep yourself muted when not speaking. And please respect the time limit for questions and comments. We want to get as many comments as we can and answers as many questions. So we ask that you respect the time limit. We also ask that you are aware that there is a public audience, so please be respectful in what you write or speak. And finally, please follow the facilitator's guidelines as they will be leading us through this presentation. Next slide, please. And finally, just another reminder in case anyone is hopping on after, is the interpretation is going to be on the right-hand side. You must select a language, whether it's English, Portuguese, Spanish, or Haitian Creole. Please select a language. Thank you.
I'm now going to speak a little bit about the federal NPDES permitting process. EPA issued draft permits for 5 facilities on February 10th, 2021. We'll accept public comments up until April 11th, 2021. We'll also host a public hearing, which is different than tonight's informal public meeting. A public hearing will be an opportunity for any member of the public, elected officials, or permittees to make statements on the record. And we will respond to those comments with written responses on all significant issues raised before we finalize and issue the final permits. If you comment on the permit, we will have your contact information, and we will also send you a copy of the written responses. After we have finalized the permit that includes written responses to all significant comments, anyone that commented on the permit may appeal a permit condition to EPA's Environmental Appeals Board. Next slide, please. I'm now going to introduce Leldon Langley from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. Leldon is in charge of the state permitting process, and I'm going to let him explain the state process. Leldon?
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Leldon Langley. I'm the Director of the Division of Watershed Management at MassDEP. And I'm here tonight with some colleagues from MassDEP, Kathy Vakalopoulos, Claire Golden, and Deneen Simpson. We had a joint process with EPA for many years, up until the summer of 2020. And that joint agreement ended. And so since then, we have now 2 separate permitting processes, the federal process that is administered by EPA and the state process that MassDEP administers. So anybody who wishes to make comments or in the event they wish to make an appeal, those processes are separate, and you would need to make those comments or appeal in both forums. And you see on the screen the location where you can access the state draft permits and information related to the permits. And you also see at the bottom, that last bullet will show you where you can submit comments to us on the state permit. Generally, the permits that MassDEP issues are the same or very similar to EPA. We sometimes add additional state permit conditions to the permits that we issue. So they are generally, however, they are generally the same. Our state permitting comment period ends on April 12th. And so you need to make your comments by that date. Thank you. We're available later on if you have questions.
Again, I'd like to remind everyone to please select a language. If you need interpretation services, please select Portuguese, Spanish, or Haitian Creole. If you don't, please select English. I'm now going to introduce Shauna Little, who's going to give an overview of the facilities and talk about the permitting effort and the conditions contained in these permits and compare them to past permitting efforts. Shauna?
Thank you. As Damien said, my name is Shauna Little, and I am a permit writer for EPA, and I am the contact person for any questions you have about these permits during the public comment period. I will be providing details for the permits for the 5 terminal facilities listed here. The global terminal is located in Revere along Lee Burbank Highway. EPA issued a single permit for all three of the global terminals, which were formerly called Global South, Global Petroleum, and Global Revco. 3 outfalls are permitted to discharge to Chelsea Creek, and 1 outfall is permitted to discharge to Sales Creek. 1 internal outfall is also permitted for treated groundwater that combines with one of the Chelsea Creek outfalls after separate treatment. The Gulf Oil Terminal is located in Chelsea along Eastern Avenue. One day after the original public notice, EPA issued a typographical correction for this permit because certain monitoring requirements were mistakenly omitted. 1 outfall is permitted in this permit to discharge to Chelsea Creek. The Irving Oil Terminal is located in Revere along Lee Burbank Highway. 1 outfall is permitted to discharge to Chelsea Creek from this terminal. The Chelsea Sandwich Terminal is located in Chelsea along Broadway. 1 outfall is permitted to discharge to Chelsea Creek. 1 internal outfall is also permitted for treated groundwater that combines with the Chelsea Creek outfall after separate treatment. And finally, the Sunoco Logistics Terminal is located in East Boston along Chelsea Street. As happened for the Gulf Terminal, EPA issued a typographical correction for this permit, as well for the omission of certain monitoring requirements. 1 outfall is permitted to discharge to the Chelsea Creek. Next slide, please. This map shows you the locations of each of the 5 terminals, with the cities of Chelsea, Revere, and Boston, and several neighboring cities also noted. Where the Chelsea Sandwich Terminal is noted, you can see where the Chelsea Creek meets the Mystic River flowing from the left of the map, and the Boston Inner Harbor flowing from this confluence toward the bottom of the image. In the bottom right, next to the map legend, you will see a portion of Logan International Airport. A dedicated pipeline from the Sunoco terminal provides jet fuel to the airport. Where the Irving Oil Terminal is noted, you can see roughly where Sales Creek flows into Belle Isle Inlet. And above where the Global Terminal is noted, you will see Revere Beach and the Atlantic Ocean to the right. Next slide, please. This diagram shows the general areas, activities, and discharges at the terminals. Petroleum products arrive in bulk quantities by ship or barge at the terminal's marine vessel dock. The petroleum products are then transferred into above-ground storage tanks in a tank farm. Each facility stores tens of millions of gallons of petroleum products. The tank farms are surrounded by earthen barriers called berms that can hold the contents of the tanks in the event of an emergency and provide additional storage for precipitation. Precipitation is shown as rain falling on the tank farm in this diagram. This water collects inside the tank farm areas or runs off the surfaces at the terminal to storm drains and flows to the terminal's oil water separator and is then discharged to the creeks. Petroleum products are transported off-site at the truck loading racks, but as mentioned before, the Sunoco terminal also transfers fuel to the airport through a pipeline. The terminals also occasionally transport products by ship or barge. Next slide, please. The types of discharges authorized from the terminals consist mostly of stormwater from rain, snow, or other types of precipitation that collects or runs off from the marine vessel dock, tank farm, and truck rack areas. As mentioned before, the Global Terminal and Chelsea Sandwich Terminal are also allowed to discharge treated groundwater through internal outfalls. These discharges are from remediation, that is, the cleanup of past releases of petroleum products to the soil and groundwater. Discharges of hydrostatic test water are allowed for all 5 terminals when a tank or related piping is repaired or replaced. Tanks are emptied and cleaned before testing. Potable water is used to fill and test the tank for leaks, except at the Irving terminal, where water from Chelsea Creek is used for testing. Hydrostatic test water is discharged if it meets the permit limits and typically only occurs on a limited number of times over each 5-year permit term. The Chelsea Sandwich Terminal is also allowed to discharge boiler blowdown and boiler condensate. This terminal uses heat from steam boilers to store heavier petroleum products. These boilers release a very small volume of blowdown and condensate. Additional allowable non-stormwater discharges are the same as those allowed under stormwater general permits for industrial facilities. Fire hydrant flushings, landscape watering, and uncontaminated groundwater are a few examples of these discharges. Next slide, please. Each of the 5 permits requires discharges from the terminals to meet technology-based and water quality-based numeric limits, as well as conduct monitoring. Technology-based numeric limits apply to the discharges based on how well the pollution control technologies remove pollutants at a particular facility or across a particular industry. Oil water separators are the minimum treatment technology used at these terminals, an example shown in the photograph. And their treatment depends on the rate the water flows through the separator, the operating temperature, the rate oil can be removed, and the density of oil being removed. Several facilities also use additional treatment technologies, including settling tanks or basins to remove solids, and filtration designed to remove particular pollutants, such as filter cartridges, sand, and carbon. Water quality-based numeric limits apply to the discharges based on which pollutants are present in a particular discharge, and if the levels of those pollutants may be above the state's surface water quality standards. The state standards for Chelsea Creek and Sales Creek support particular designated uses in the water. These uses include aesthetics, for example, the taste and odor of the water, aquatic life, recreation, and fishing and shellfishing. Monitoring requirements generally apply to the discharges for particular pollutants that EPA needs additional information. EPA uses these data to determine if future limits are needed. Next slide, please. This table shows a comparison of the typical permit limits for the terminals over time. The draft permits include technology-based limits for flow, which are based on the size of the oil water separators in use, total suspended solids, oil and grease, and methyl tert butyl ether, also known as MTBE, consistent with earlier permits. New limits are being proposed for benzene and naphthalene at stricter levels than earlier permits because the samples collected over the last 5 years generally show that the terminals can meet these lower limits. The draft permits also include water quality-based limits for pH and benzoapyrene, consistent with earlier permits. New limits are proposed for fecal coliform, a type of bacteria, the other 6 group 1 polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, total residual chlorine, the metals copper, iron, and zinc, cyanide, ammonia, and whole effluent toxicity. For any discharge where samples show levels that may be above state water quality standards, these limits apply. Finally, the draft permits include monitoring requirements for the volatile petroleum hydrocarbons, ethylbenzene, toluene, and total xylenes, the other 8 group 2 polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, ethanol, tert butyl alcohol, and phenol, consistent with earlier permits. New monitoring is proposed for 6 per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, referred to using the acronym PFAS. The 6 compounds are listed by their acronyms in the permit: PFHXS, PFHPA, PFNA, PFOS, PFOA, and PFDA. Finally, the draft permits will continue to require ambient monitoring in both the Chelsea and Sales Creeks. Next permit. Excuse me, next slide. And finally, special conditions are included in the draft permits, which are non-numeric requirements. For example, best management practices, also known as BMPs, are control measures for stormwater. The permittee is required to implement and continually evaluate structural controls, such as the oil water separator, containment areas and holding tanks, operational procedures, and operator training to minimize the potential discharge of pollutants in stormwater. The Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, or SWIP, is a written document that describes these control measures used at the terminal to meet the conditions of the permit. Permittees sign and certify annually that the SWIP is current and is being complied with. The draft permits also prohibit several discharges EPA identified as main sources of pollutants in stormwater associated with petroleum handling. Tank bottom water, sludge, contaminated groundwater, and firefighting foam are a few examples of these prohibited discharges. Additional conditions and monitoring is also required for hydrostatic test water when testing occurs. Discharges of chemicals and additives, such as materials used to treat the wastewater, are not allowed under the permits unless the material has been disclosed to EPA. A process to obtain permission is specified in each of the permits. For the global facilities, restrictions have been added for stormwater transfers to prevent bypass from one outfall to another, because this facility has multiple outfalls to multiple receiving waters. Finally, a bioassessment is proposed to evaluate the extent discharges from the terminals impact the sediment and associated aquatic life and habitat. The bioassessment requires the collection of information for the water column, the benthic morphology, the nature of the substrate, requires benthic pollutant analysis, and requires conducting a qualitative biological monitoring program. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Shauna. This is our reminder slide. If you need interpretation services, to please select the language that you need, either Portuguese, Spanish, or Haitian Creole. You must select a language. If you do not need interpretation, please select English. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Marcus Holmes, who is our Regional Environmental Justice Coordinator, and he works in the regional office. Marcus?
Thank you, Damien. Good evening, all. Again, my name is Marcus Holmes, and I'm the Environmental Justice Coordinator for EPA Region 1, which covers the 6 New England states. EPA's authority to address environmental justice derives from our current environmental laws and statutes, but more specifically by Executive Order 12898 on environmental justice, which was issued in 1994. This executive order directed all federal agencies to identify and address disproportionately high and adverse human health or environmental effects on their actions on minority and low-income populations. The executive order also provided insight on how to approach this EJ work, and that's to the greatest extent practicable and permitted by law. EPA has our own definition of environmental justice, which is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulation, and policies. And this is regardless of race, color, national origin, or income. There are multiple levels of an environmental justice analysis review. An EJ analysis is the highest level of review. And that was what was chosen for this site in this project. The EJ analysis was issued at the same time as the permit and is seek to address any environmental justice related concerns. The contents of the EJ analysis includes multiple different things. You can go to the next slide, please. The content of the analysis includes a description of the permitted NPDES discharges. It includes a characterization of the demographic, economic, environmental, and health factors of that community impacted. It also identifies and considers disproportionately high and adverse human health effects on specific minority and low-income populations. The goal is to inform the development of these permits by guiding EPA's actions related to concerns within the scope of the specific NPDES permit, as well as concerns beyond the scope of the permit with respect to identifying and capturing environmental related issues that's impacting this community in hopes to better coordinate with our local, state, and federal partners to address these issues. We look forward to getting your input on this EJ analysis, and we'll continue to look for opportunities to incorporate EJ considerations, not just in these permits, but in all aspects of the work that we do. We encourage you to provide comments, and we'll greatly consider your feedback to incorporate them into these next steps moving forward. Next, I would like to introduce our environmental justice team member and Water Division representative, Evan Lewis, to talk about the specific EJ considerations that have been incorporated into this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcus. And as Marcus just said, I serve as the liaison between the Water Division and the EJ coordinator. So how did we apply what Marcus just spoke of into the context of these permits? Well, first, we let community organizations know that this environmental action was taking place. And we did that by contacting them back in the fall, October 2020 to be specific, to let them know that these NPDES permits were being drafted. We also contacted them in order to see if they had any input vis-a-vis data in the promulgation of our EJ analysis. And just like Marcus said, we developed and issued another EJ analysis to supplement the one that we did back in 2014. And in that EJ analysis, we took a look at our authority under Executive Order 12898. We took a look at the discharge, the potential impact of that discharge, and potential steps moving forward. Subsequently, we translated that EJ analysis into multiple languages that reflected the various languages that were spoken in the impacted communities. We also prepared a community information sheet that took the information that Shauna spoke about earlier and boiled it down into a more digestible format for community members, as an NPDES permit can be quite dense, technical, and bureaucratic for someone who doesn't deal with them on a regular basis. And we included that informational sheet along with the draft permit and other materials associated with the public notice. However, before that point, we let these community organizations that we contacted back in the fall know that the public notice was going to happen ahead of time by sending them an advance notice of the public notice. And when that public notice happened, as I just said, we promulgated that information sheet that we previously prepared. Next slide. After the public notice period has begun, we extended that public notice period from the default period of 30 days to 60 days to allow for as much public feedback as is possible via written comments. Additionally, we're hosting this public meeting right now before holding another formal public hearing where we can also get feedback verbally that we can respond to after the public notice period ends after the 60 days from which it began. Next slide.
Thank you, Evan and Marcus. I believe this is our final reminder. If you need interpretation services, please select a language, Portuguese, Spanish, Haitian, Creole. You must select a language. Please select English if you do not need interpretation. Next slide. I'm now going to go through the final few slides on public participation. As we've specified, the draft permits are now on public notice for review and comments. All documents may be downloaded and printed from EPA's website, www.epa.gov/NPDES/permits Chelsea River Bulk Petroleum Storage Facility, NPDES permits. Copies can also be obtained from EPA's Record Center and by calling 617-918-1990. Next slide, please. Questions during the public comment period on the draft permits should be directed to Shauna Little. She can be reached at 617-918-1989, or she can be emailed at little.shauna@epa.gov. For questions regarding the environmental justice analysis, please contact Marcus Holmes, our environmental justice coordinator. Marcus can be reached at 617-918-1630, or you can email Marcus at holmes.marcus@epa.gov. Next slide. As I mentioned previously, we will hold a formal public hearing 2 weeks from tonight, March 29th, beginning at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. The format will also be a virtual public hearing for the reasons that Jeff explained at the start of this meeting. Any person may submit oral comments at the time of the public hearing. If you wish to speak, you're encouraged to pre-register in advance using the link provided on our website. Access to the public hearing will be sent to those who pre-register and will be provided on EPA's website. We also encourage written comments to be submitted on the record in addition to oral comments. As I mentioned, the public comment period began February 10th, 2021 and will close midnight, April 11th, 2021. Oral comments may be provided at the public hearing 2 weeks from tonight, or written comments may be sent to Shauna Little at little.shauna@epa.gov. She can also receive a fax message at 617-918-0989. I guess that wasn't our last slide of reminder of interpretation services, but please, if you need interpretation services for the rest of this presentation, please select a language. You may select English, Portuguese, Spanish, or Haitian Creole. I'm now going to turn the meeting back to Jeff to moderate the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. And thank you all the other EPA presenters and to Weldon Langley for presenting on behalf of Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. We will now start the question and answer session. I would like to provide brief instructions about how to ask your questions. If you joined tonight's meeting through the Zoom client, please raise your virtual hand in Zoom to enter the question queue. Soon, I will begin the Q&A session by asking if a participant in the Spanish audio channel has a question, and then rotate through the Portuguese, Haitian Creole, and English audio channels. I will repeat this rotation as often as needed to ensure that participants in each audio channel have an opportunity to ask their questions. Please be sure to unmute your device when it is your turn to ask a question. You may also turn on your camera if you wish, but that's certainly not required. You may also enter questions in the chat area or chat box. I will periodically review questions in the chat area and read them aloud. I will also periodically ask if anyone who called in or otherwise cannot raise their hand or enter information in the chat, if they would like to ask any questions. During those times, please unmute your device and ask your question. If you have more than one device running this meeting, please make sure the audio on those devices is muted before you speak. Otherwise, we may encounter problems with feedback or echo. After you have asked your question, one of the EPA or Massachusetts DEP panel members will respond to your question. If you have more than one question, you can proceed through them as needed, but I ask that you be mindful of others that may also want to ask a question. We will do our best to answer all questions that people wish to ask. Please limit your questions to clarifications you need to understand the draft NPDES permits or the environmental justice analysis. If you have opinions you wish to share, rather than asking clarifying questions, we ask that you share them by submitting formal written comments, either in writing or verbally during the virtual public hearing that EPA will be hosting on Monday, March 29th. Okay, let's begin. Okay, first I would like to ask if there's anybody in the Spanish channel that would like to ask a question. If one of the interpreters could let me know if there's a question or not, that would be helpful. I'm not hearing anything from the go to the Spanish room. Are there any questions in the Spanish channel? Thank you. Okay. Are there any questions in the Portuguese channel? Thank you. Are there any questions in the Haitian Creole channel? Thank you. Okay, I'm now in the English channel. Let me see if anyone has their hand raised. Okay. Ian Coghill, could you please unmute your device and ask your question?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. I had a couple of questions, but I don't want to take up the whole time. But one of the questions I had was about the group 1 PAAHs, the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. So I'm trying to understand how the limit for them, the water quality based limit, is a much lower number than the compliance limit. So the amount that the terminals need to test for is I think 0.1, and then but the limit that's supposed to be there to protect the water quality is 0.018. I'm just trying to understand what the difference is and where the 0.1 comes from.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank-
So I believe
Thank-
your question is related to PAH limits. Damien, would you like to take this one?
I'd like Shauna to take it. Shauna, could you take that? I could take it, but
Sure, yeah.
you give a better technical answer than me.
I will try, yes. So the human health criteria for group 1 PAHs, as you said, is very, very low. And we actually aren't capable of measuring values that low with any Clean Water Act approved test methods. And NPDES permits have to use test methods that are listed in 40 CFR Part 136 in order to do the sampling and analysis for compliance. So we followed the recommendation of two things: the technical support document for water quality-based toxics control, which is a publicly available guidance document by EPA that recommends when you can't measure compliance with a particular limit, you set the compliance level, is the term used, at the minimum level of the analytical test method. More recent regulations called the Sufficiently Sensitive Test Method Rule provide a little bit more clarity as to how we can select what that minimum level is. So we looked at all of the test methods that are approved in Part 136 for analyzing Group 1 PAHs, and the 0.1 value is the lower calibration standard, sometimes referred to as a reporting limit, for the most sensitive test method in Part 136 that is available in Region 1. So there is one other test method that can sometimes measure a little bit lower that is not in widespread use in commercial laboratories in our region. However, the reporting limit of 0.1, which we obtained from Region 1's laboratory as the lower calibration standard, is certainly something that we welcome comment on. I hope that clarifies. If you have a follow-up, let me know.
Yes, I had one quick clarifying sort of follow-up question to that. And because I noticed that some of the terminals had tested lower than the 0.1, but I can imagine that sometimes you know, depending on the sample, you can get better or worse. But I just want to make sure that I understood one of the other provisions. So is it the case that if the terminals test and say they've found found something that was like 0.09, they don't report that? Is that the idea, that they just say it's less than 0.1, even though they found a particular concentration? Am I reading the permit right there?
If a value was actually detected, they report it as a detection. Based on the proposed compliance level, the 0.09 would be in compliance with that compliance level. So there are a couple of different values that are kind of important in the range. So, we set the compliance level at this minimum level, but any analytical laboratory is also allowed to develop a laboratory specific method detection limit. And so that's why you can sometimes see variability in how low a certain lab can report to. But sometimes there are values that are above the method detection limit, but below the reporting limit, that an analytical lab will flag as what's called an estimated value. That would not be an actual measurement because of the confidence associated with that is not high enough to kind of pass QA/QC requirements. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Thank you. I had
Okay, no problem.
a couple other questions on something else, but I don't want to take up the whole line. So if somebody else had questions, I don't want to walk
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, Ian, if you don't mind, I'll go around to the other areas. And if you have another question, please feel free to put your hand up again. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat. So does anyone who is on by phone have a question? If you do, just unmute and speak up. I'll give you a moment. Okay, I'm going to go around the audio channels again.
Jeff, can I jump in? We do have, looks like a Patrick.
Patrick Heron from the Mystic River Watershed Association. I would be most grateful if somebody could talk generally about how EPA determined the frequency of sampling across the analytes, that for some of these analytes, they're collected twice monthly, and for others, they're very surprisingly sampled only once a year. And so that would be really valuable to hear that broad scheme of how EPA discriminates and chooses to sample some frequently and others infrequently.
Damien, who do you think is best able to answer that question?
Again, and I hate to put her on the spot, but it probably is Shauna. You know, we develop monitoring programs to get what we call representative sampling. And so it really depends on what we're sampling for and what the purpose is, whether it's compliance or for, you know, scanning purposes. And I do understand that there are differences in the monitoring frequencies, but the goal is always to collect enough data, at least 10 samples for something like a wet test to do some statistical analysis. And we do try to balance and are required to balance some consideration of costs. But if for more specifics, Shauna, is that something you could speak to? I mean, we do have quite a bit of data on these facilities already, but is there anything you'd like to add, Shauna?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, overall, what drives us by regulation is, you know, monitoring requirements are determined on a case-by-case basis to the extent necessary to determine compliance. And so especially for parameters in the permits that do not have numeric limits, that we are collecting information for some other reason, you'll tend to see the frequency of those a bit less. As Damien said, we try to design a monitoring program that will give us enough information to be able to actually make a decision regarding those particular parameters in the future. Most of the parameters that you're seeing at an annual basis in these permits are because we use what are called indicator parameters. You know, petroleum products have many thousands of individual pollutant compounds, and it's just not practical to try to impose numeric limits for every single one of them. And so we choose a handful of what we consider representative compounds that have very stringent limits. We know a lot about their toxicity. But some of the compounds that are kind of related to those, we want to just do a quick scan occasionally to make sure that the parameter we chose to limit and control all of those compounds is actually working. So that's why you see those kind of, I guess, less frequent parameters in these permits.
Thank you, Shauna.
I guess I would I just want to add, and this is true for all the comments we're discussing tonight. These are all something that you could also submit a formal comment on that would be happy to respond to if we're not being, you know, we may not have all the answers tonight. So if there's a specific parameter that you either wanted to see more or less monitoring for, that would be a comment we would welcome and that we would consider and address.
Could I add one more part of that question, if I could have the moment one more longer, is that with our experience in stormwater monitoring, we are frequently using a event mean concentration and capturing first flush and averaging over a storm or over a big flush of water that goes by. And much of the sampling described here are grab samples. Could somebody talk a little bit about when grab sampling effectively captures what's happening, and when it would be appropriate to have an auto sampler to catch a real representative sample of that discharge?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit generally to that, and then I would ask again Shauna to supplement. So I think the difference between these terminals and what I guess we would call straight stormwater permits is that these terminals do have the ability to hold back water to discharge. So they don't have to discharge during a storm event. And so again, we do require that the sample is representative at some point during the discharge. I don't remember, and again, Shauna hopefully can fill in on the grab what we specify if it's a first flush or not. I know on the hydrostatic test water, we do have a sampling regime to capture the tank being discharged. But yeah, we would again welcome a comment on that if you think there's something that could be designed that would provide a more representative sample. Would be happy to address that. Shauna, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Just the configuration of these facilities, they don't necessarily discharge in conjunction with storm events. And we do actually specify some pretty specific discharge conditions in order to kind of avoid the potential for cumulative effects, and to ensure that these facilities aren't all discharging simultaneously. We actually have kind of designed discharge conditions that we ask the facilities to try to stagger their discharges and discharge on an outgoing tide to avoid the potential for things like re-entrainment in the water body. So yeah, they have a lot of storage capacity, and I'm just trying to look really quick. Unfortunately, I don't think I could find the answer. I believe we required the sample within 15 minutes of the initiation of discharge, unless it's infeasible because it's, night or dangerous or something like that.
That sounds right to me, but I don't have the permit.
Yeah, I double check that in the permit for sure.
Yeah, but please, Patrick, feel free to follow up and or submit a comment, and would be happy to run that down. But the goal is always representative sampling with enough data to do any type of statistical analysis that we need to do on it.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you, Shauna. Thank you, Patrick. I'm going to start going around the audio channels again. If anyone has a question at any time, please feel free to raise your hand using Zoom, or type it in the comment box. And as we go around the rooms, I will get to your question. So are there any questions in the Spanish room? Thank you. Any questions in the Portuguese channel? Thank you. Any question in the Haitian Creole channel? Thank you. Okay, in the English channel, I see John Walkie has a question.
Yeah, sure. And we may have addressed this a little bit, but in looking through the 4 contaminants that had a reduced monitoring frequency, I think it was chromium, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene. And was that the reduced frequency, was that related to Shauna, what you were talking about in terms of petroleum having a multitude of things and you just picked the most appropriate ones? And was there some other reason why those were dropped down in their frequency?
Sure, yeah, for the other volatile petroleum hydrocarbons, yes, that's the case. Benzene is the parameter we're using to control those because it's the one we can impose kind of the most stringent limit for. Chromium, none of the facilities actually detected chromium in the monitoring data over the previous 5 years, I believe. So if you have time or interest in looking back at the previous permits, we had a pretty comprehensive set of monitoring requirements for pollutants that we hadn't kind of investigated before. And so we did take those data and look at which were detected and which weren't. And that's why you're seeing a handful of new numeric limits in these permits. It's based on the results of all of that monitoring. So for parameters that weren't really detected, you'll see those monitoring requirements drop off.
Great.
And I think we've summarized those past results in an attachment to the fact sheet or appendix. B, I want to say, but I'm not sure.
And in terms of looking at the past reports, when there's been like, what do they call it? The DMR, discharge monitoring report, there have been missing value numbers. It's counted as reported, but there was no DMR value number. And I was just wondering, are these, are we considering these violations for facilities for not reporting a DMR value, or how does that work?
So I guess I could speak a little bit to that, and Jeff is going to speak to anything compliance related. So we don't here in the permitting program make determinations on compliance or non-compliance. I just want to make that clear. There's a couple of reasons. They could have not had a discharge is certainly one reason for not reporting. But yeah, I would defer to Jeff because he has been, in touch with our compliance folks on, their views. But I can't really speak to, every case and whether it would be considered a violation or not. Jeff, do you have anything to add on that?
I don't have anything to add specifically to that, but I would certainly, John, encourage you to submit a comment if you have concerns about how that information is being represented in ECHO. And if you feel that, or if anybody feels that there may be violations occurring, there is a report a violation system at echo.epa.gov where you can report a violation.
Yeah, and I would just want to, I'm sorry, Jeff, just second your comment that please, if you have any comments you'd like, more specific written responses to like that, please submit them between now and April 11th, including at the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Ian, you have your hand up? Ian Coghill?
Yes, thank you. I noticed that there were a couple people who kind of got in ahead of me in the chat, so I didn't want to jump over them. But
why don't we take your question now, and then
Okay.
I'm going to go straight to the chat from after your question.
Great. So I had a question, sort of compound question, I guess, about the major storm provision. One was pretty minor, but it's the provision that's been added referring to sort of storm preparedness and things along those lines. I noticed that the some of the provisions that were included in the recently issued 2021 multi-sector general permit aren't in these permits, and I wanted to see, was the plan to add them and they just haven't been put together? Was there a reason for not including some of those provisions? In particular, I think there's a couple of footnotes that aren't in there, but I think there might be a little bit of other difference too.
I could speak to that, but again, Shauna may be the best person. Certainly, Ian, we would welcome a comment if we have not cited something correctly or not included something that you feel should have been included from the multi-sector general permit. We did. It was kind of late breaking when that came out, and we were adjusting the documents, and we may have skipped over a footnote or two. And so we welcome a comment on that, but it was not, I think, and Shauna, you can speak to that. I think our intent was to be as consistent as possible, and certainly not less stringent than the MSGP that was recently renewed. So again, Ian, we would welcome a comment and a chance to respond to that. But Shauna, do you have any clarifying?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it was a timing issue where we in the region didn't know what the final provisions were in the final 2021 MSGP basically until it was released to the public. So we were able to be consistent with kind of the permit provisions for the most part. I think the footnote you might be referring to has to do with what to consult to identify whether or not you're at risk of a sea level rise or flooding or things like that. And we relied on the language from the draft 2020 MSGP in the fact sheet, which refers to the FEMA flood maps for a couple of reasons. One is that we very openly solicit comments on this provision because it is new. And so we're hoping if there are better data sets for these particular facilities, we're certainly open to reviewing them. The second thing is we did identify these facilities specifically as having risk. And so unlike the general permit, which puts the onus on the permittee to determine whether or not they are in a potential flood hazard area, we've already identified what parts of these facilities are in flood hazard areas based on the FEMA maps. And the provisions of the permit are not provisions. So by provisions, I mean best management practices for the most part, not ones that the permittees have to consider, but actually do because they've been identified already as being at risk. So it skips a little bit of the process of the general permit in that regard. But yeah, as Damien has said, definitely, we're soliciting comments on this provision in particular. So do feel free.
Great, thank you. And I just had sort of one related question to it, just in understanding the idea behind the provision. Is the expectation, or is the expectation that a facility is going to check to try to figure out their flood risk, or in this case, that they've sort of already been designed to or identified as having a flood risk, that the facility is going to sort of do a stress test to figure out how they would do in a flood, and what their berms are like and all that kind of stuff, and sort of how prepared are they? Is that the sort of concept behind this provision?
Yeah, so the permit has already identified, or the fact sheet explains areas of their facilities that are already identified as having increased risk, and each of the BMP provisions has to either be implemented, or in the event that the facility has already implemented that type of BMP, then they would note it in their stormwater pollution prevention plan.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Shauna. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Damien. There are two questions in the chat. The first question is there a summary table for the basis of the permit limits? That is TBELs, WBELs, BPJ. I did not see this in the fact sheet. Damien or Shauna, would you like to answer that question, please?
Yeah, I don't believe there is a summary table, but every permit limit derived in the fact sheet should have a reference to the basis. So, for example, I think Shauna mentioned that limiting benzene to 5 micrograms per liter as the limit of technology we feel like the facilities can achieve through both their operational practices and their treatment. So that would be an example of a TBEL. A water quality limit would be probably something like chlorine in the permit. But I think you'd have to go to each individual section derivation to see. We don't have, that I'm aware of, a summary sheet.
Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
correct. Each individual pollutant has a description in the fact sheet. It's under section 5 primarily of the fact sheets. And each pollutant will tell you what the limit is based on.
Thank you, Shauna.
Mhm.
The next comment has a couple questions built into it. The first is, states there were 100 violations by the 7 terminals from 2013 through 2020. Could you talk more about how that has been factored into these new permits?
Sure. And as I can take this one, Jeff, and Shauna can weigh in. As I previously mentioned, our compliance folks would speak to any violations or potential violations. In terms of how they were factored into the permit development, of course, we review all the past data, and these permits do go to our compliance section for review prior to public notice for their information. So they would basically take it from there. We don't generally, I would say, develop permits limits based on past compliance. That is, again, an area not for the permitting program, but for our enforcement and compliance division. And the second part of Roseanne's question was, why did we consolidate the 3 permits into one? I think probably the short answer is for administrative ease. They are all essentially one facility owned by a single entity. So it made sense to combine them into one permit for this round of permitting. But Shauna, was there something else that you would like to add? And then Jeff, you can also weigh in on the compliance, because I know you've spoken with ECAT on that.
Yeah, for the consolidated permit, the what used to be the 3 permits each had their own unique LLC entities. So they were actually called Global South LLC, Global Petroleum LLC, and Global Revco LLC. The Global Companies LLC is now the one consolidated entity. And so rather than issuing 3 permits that are all right next to each other to the same entity, we decided it would be probably easier for everyone to understand if they were just all consolidated into one for the global terminal overall.
Thank you, Shauna. Thank you, Damien. The last part of the question is, what is the plan to make the ECHO database more user-friendly? I would strongly recommend providing comments that you feel there is room for improvement for the ECHO database. My understanding is that the people who keep that database and maintain it and design it try to keep it as user-friendly as possible and look for ways to improve it. So any suggestions you have would be very welcomed. I don't think we can comment on the statement about the number of violations between 2013 and 2020. Sometimes the information in ECHO, there's a difference between a violation and an exceedance or a permit exceedance. So to define something as a violation can be a complicated process. So I don't think I really have anything to add to that.
Jeff, if I can add, I obviously don't have any comments on ECHO enforcement, but definitely understand the complexities of the system and navigating it. On the environmental justice side of things, one of the things that we're trying to do is offer just a little bit more kind of technical assistance for people who are trying to use these tools. So we are making ourselves available to have conversations with different community groups and organizations to try to maybe understand some of these things. So that's something that we can maybe follow up on if anyone is interested later on.
Thank you, Marcus. That's very helpful. Okay. Is anybody who is on the phone, on phone only, does anyone on the phone have a question? Okay, I'll go through the audio channels again. Any questions in the Spanish channel? Thank you. Anybody have a question in the Portuguese channel? Thank you. Any questions in the Haitian Creole channel? Thank you. Back in the English channel, and one of my colleagues reminded me to that folks need to, on their devices, may need to hit *6 to unmute. Okay, John Walkie, I see your hand is up. Do you have another question?
No, I think that might have just been left over. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I don't see any other hands up at present. Is there anyone in the English audio channel who has a question who hasn't raised their hand? Okay. And in the chat, I don't see any other questions. Oh, I do see a question. This question in the chat is, why are there so many missing DMRs? I'm not, Damien, do you want to?
Yeah, I would have to review that, and that would be a good comment. And again, please understand we're not formally responding tonight. So any comments that you've had this evening that you either feel we haven't addressed adequately or weren't prepared to address, we welcome public comments anytime between now and April 11th. So we would really have to take a harder look on that question. Shauna, I know we summarized the DMR data. I was not aware of significant missing DMRs, but that would be something that we would be happy to respond to sort of after further evaluation.
Yeah, I don't know if the asker could be more specific as to what facility maybe. It's possible they're talking about Global Petroleum. And it's not that there were missing DMRs there, it's just there was no data reported for a pretty big period of time for one of those outfalls.
Thanks, Shauna.
Mhm.
Okay, I will wait. We may have reached the end. It may be that nobody has any more questions, but I will wait a minute and see if there are others. Okay, here's a question in the chat. Is the Zoom meeting recording going to be uploaded somewhere we can access after this meeting is finished? So I do know that this meeting is going to be aired on a couple of public access television stations, which we're not able to air it live. We will, we need to decide about sharing it in other ways, but I expect it will be available, if it is available, on EPA's webpage for these NPDES permits. One of my colleagues sent me a reminder for folks to please be sure to register for the March 29th public hearing. The link is in the chat right now. The way to register is through Eventbrite. Does anyone else have a question that they would like to ask before we end the meeting? Please raise your hand or put a question in the chat or speak out. Okay, I think that's a wrap. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating in tonight's meeting, and thank you for folks from EPA and DEP who presented, and thank you very much to the interpreters who provided their excellent services tonight, and to the closed captioning service. And we look forward to receiving your public comments, and look forward to hearing from you if you wish to provide oral comments on March 29th. Please be sure to register through Eventbrite for that public hearing. And I hope everyone has a good night. Take care.
Jeff, I'd like to just thank everyone
yes.
also. Sorry.
Yes, please, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And thank you, Jeff, for doing a great job. And thanks to the EPA team and the state folks. I really do appreciate everyone's involvement tonight and taking time out of your busy days to understand these permits. And we really do want to hear from you, certainly on the record, and give us a chance to respond fully to any concerns that you would have or continue to have concerning the Chelsea Creek permits. So thank you, good night, and stay safe.